The moment Elena signed the rejection papers, her wolf howled in agony. But it wasn't until she saw the golden crown materialize on Marcus's head that she understood what she'd just thrown away. The pen slipped from her trembling fingers and clattered against the ancient stone altar. Around her, 300 wolves stood witness in the ceremonial clearing, their collective gasp cutting through the midnight air like a blade. No, 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 no. Elena's legs gave out. She would have collapsed if Damon hadn't caught her elbow, his grip too tight, his smile too satisfied. "It's done, love," he whispered against her ear. "You chose correctly." But the words barely registered. Her entire world had narrowed to the man standing across from her, the man she'd just rejected, as golden light erupted from his skin like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. Marcus Ashford. Cold, distant, impossible Marcus who had never once smiled at her in 3 years. Who had watched her with those unreadable dark eyes while his younger brother charmed her, courted her, convinced her she was loved. Ancient runes carved themselves across his arms, his neck, his face, blazing with power so old it made her wolf whimper and drop to its belly in submission. The crown that formed above his head wasn't metal or jewels. It was pure energy, woven from the magic of 7 territories, and every wolf in the clearing fell to their knees. Every wolf except Damon. And Elena, still frozen in horror, watching the man she just destroyed close his eyes against a pain she couldn't begin to comprehend. He's the Alpha King. The thought screamed through her mind. Marcus is the Alpha King. And I just... rise. Marcus's voice rolled across the clearing like thunder, and the pack obeyed as one. The crown faded, the runes dimming until they disappeared beneath his skin, but Elena could still feel them, could feel him, in a way that made her soul ache. The mate bond was severed, the rejection complete. So why did her wolf still cry for him? 3 hours earlier, Elena had been certain she was making the right choice. "You're really doing this?" her best friend Mia had asked, watching Elena apply the ceremonial marking. A spiral of silver paint across her collarbone that declared her intent to claim one mate and reject another. "I love Damon." Elena had said it firmly, ignoring the flutter of uncertainty in her chest. "I've loved him for 3 years. Marcus is..." She'd struggled for the right word. "Marcus is a stranger." Mia hadn't argued. She never did when it came to the Ashford brothers. But something in her silence had felt heavy, like a warning Elena wasn't equipped to hear. Now, standing in the aftermath of the ceremony, Elena finally understood what that silence meant. "You knew." She turned to Damon, her voice raw. "You knew what he was." Damon's handsome face flickered with something she'd never seen before. Something cold and calculating beneath the warmth she'd always loved. "Everyone knows what he is, Elena. He's the pack's second. The beta." "Don't." The word cracked in her throat. "Don't lie to me. Not now." Around them, the clearing had begun to empty. Pack members filed out in stunned silence, shooting glances between Damon and the empty space where Marcus had stood moments ago. The Alpha King, their Alpha King, had simply vanished into the shadows without a word, without even looking at her. Damon's grip on her arm tightened. "We should go home. You're in shock. Why did you pursue me?" The question stopped him cold. Elena watched his expression shift, cycle, settle into something she didn't recognize. "Because I love you." "No." She pulled free from his grasp, stumbling backward. Her wolf surged against her skin, frantic, furious, screaming at her to run, to chase after the mate she'd just rejected, to fix this somehow. "No, you don't get to say that. Not after..." Her voice broke. "The bond, Damon. The fated bond marked both of you. That's supposed to be impossible. It hasn't happened in centuries." He finished calmly. "Yes, I know." The world tilted. Elena had grown up on stories of the fated bond, that unbreakable connection between destined mates, forged by the moon goddess herself. One wolf, one mate, one destiny. But 3 months ago, when she'd felt the bond snap into place, it had connected her to 2 souls, 2 wolves, 2 brothers who couldn't have been more different. She'd chosen Damon because he was warm, because he laughed easily and brought her wildflowers and held her like she was precious. Because Marcus, cold, silent, distant Marcus, had looked right through her like she didn't exist. Because you made it easy, her wolf snarled. He made the choice easy on purpose. You manipulated me. It wasn't a question. Damon's smile finally fell away, replaced by something sharper. Something honest in a way that felt like glass in her chest. I positioned you, he said. There's a difference. For what? For power. He stepped toward her, and for the first time, Elena saw him clearly. Not the charming younger brother, but the strategist. The predator. Do you know what happens when a fated mate is rejected, Elena? Do you know what power transfers when that bond breaks? Her blood ran cold. She'd heard whispers, of course. Old legends about rejected Lunas. About the darkness that lived in the severed edges of a mate bond, waiting to be claimed. Most dismissed them as myths, cautionary tales to keep wolves from making impulsive choices. But the look in Damon's eyes said they weren't myths at all. The darkness goes to whoever helped orchestrate the rejection, Elena breathed. The wolf who positioned themselves to benefit. Smart girl. Damon's smile returned, but it was different now. Hungrier. You just handed me power that most wolves only dream about. And the best part? Marcus can't touch me. Not without admitting what he is. Not without painting a target on your back. His hand brushed her cheek almost tenderly. You're protected now. By the very rejection that destroyed him. Elena's stomach heaved. 3 years. For 3 years, she'd believed Damon loved her. She'd turned away from Marcus's silence, from those dark eyes that watched her with something she'd been too stupid to recognize. Protection. He'd been protecting her. Every time he'd walked past without speaking. Every time he'd left a room when she entered. Every time he'd kept his distance like she was something fragile and precious. He'd been hiding what he was to keep her safe from the enemies who would tear through anyone the Alpha King cared about. And she'd rejected him for it. I need to find him. She started toward the tree line, but Damon's hand closed around her wrist. He won't want to see you. I don't care. Elena. His voice hardened. The rejection is final. The bond is gone. Whatever you think you're going to say to him won't change anything. She ripped free with enough force to stumble. Maybe not, but I'm going to say it anyway. The Alpha's territory stretched for miles beyond the pack house, but Elena knew where Marcus would go. There was a cliff at the northern edge, overlooking a valley that spanned 3 territories. She'd seen him there before, standing alone in the darkness, carrying a weight she'd never understood. Until now, she found him exactly where she expected, silhouetted against the stars, the wind cutting through his dark hair. He didn't turn when she approached, didn't acknowledge her presence at all. The absence of the bond hit her like a physical blow. Where warmth should have been, where the golden thread connecting their souls should have hummed, there was only cold silence, only emptiness. I didn't know. The words fell out of her, broken and useless. Marcus, I swear I didn't know what you were, what he was doing. I thought, her voice cracked. I thought you didn't want me. Nothing. Not a word. Not a glance. Please. She stepped closer, close enough to see the rigid set of his shoulders, the white-knuckled grip of his fists. Please just look at me. Yell at me. Tell me you hate me. Something. Anything. Finally, he turned, and Elena's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. The mask was there. That cold, distant expression she'd interpreted as indifference for 3 years. But behind it, just for a moment, she caught something else. Devastation. Raw, absolute devastation. The kind that came from a wound too deep to ever fully heal. I did that, she thought. I put that look in his eyes. Marcus held her gaze for one endless heartbeat. Then, without a single word, he walked past her and disappeared into the shadows. The Alpha King who had hidden his true self to protect her. The mate she'd just destroyed. Gone. Wanting to see what would happen next? Subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. Elena woke to the sound of her own screaming. The nightmare clung to her like cobwebs. Marcus walking away, the golden crown fading, her wolf howling into an endless void where the mate bond used to live. She pressed her hand against her chest, searching for the warmth that had once connected them. Nothing. Just cold, empty silence. 3 weeks. 3 weeks since the rejection ceremony, and the void inside her only grew deeper. She pushed herself upright, wincing at the ache in her bones. Everything hurt lately. Moving, breathing, existing. Her body was punishing her for a choice her soul couldn't accept, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. The bathroom mirror showed her the truth she'd been avoiding. Elena barely recognized herself. Her once lustrous black hair hung limp and dull, strands coming loose every time she brushed it. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor, dark circles bruising the hollows beneath her eyes. She'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose, her cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. But the worst part was her eyes. The wolf that had lived behind them, fierce, golden, alive, was gone. When Elena reached for her, she found only silence. A vast, echoing emptiness where her other half used to be. I'm dying, she thought, gripping the edge of the sink. Slowly, quietly, I'm dying. Elena? Damon's voice drifted through the bedroom door. Breakfast is ready. We have the territorial council at noon. She closed her eyes against the wave of revulsion that washed through her. Smile, nod, survive. It had become her mantra, the only thing keeping her moving through days that blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and despair. I'll be down in 10 minutes. She didn't recognize her own voice anymore. It was thin, hollow, stripped of everything that had once made her her. But Damon didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he just didn't care. The man who had spent 3 years convincing her she was loved had revealed his true nature with terrifying speed. The warmth she cherished was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. The tender touches had become possessive grips. The loving words had twisted into commands. And his eyes, God, his eyes. Something dark lived in them now. Something hungry and wrong, feeding on the power he'd stolen from her broken bond. Elena could feel it when he looked at her, that wrongness crawling over her skin like insects. She dressed mechanically, choosing a high-necked dress that hid the bruises on her collarbone. Not from violence, Damon was too smart for that. But his grip had become iron lately, his fingers leaving marks she couldn't explain to the pack members who still smiled at her like she hadn't destroyed everything. Like I hadn't destroyed him. The thought of Marcus came unbidden, as it always did. She shoved it down, buried it deep, because thinking about him made the void inside her pulse with agony. Made her wolf, her silent, dying wolf, stir weakly before falling still again. I did this to myself, she reminded herself. I chose this. But had she? Really? When every choice had been orchestrated, every option carefully positioned by a man who'd spent 3 years playing the long game. Did it even matter anymore? Breakfast was a performance. Elena sat at Damon's right hand in the formal dining room, pushing food around her plate while pack members filed in to pay their respects. Word of her condition had spread. An illness, Damon called it, brought on by the stress of the rejection ceremony. The pack accepted the explanation without question. Why wouldn't they? Damon was charming. Damon was sympathetic. Damon held her hand through the entire meal, playing the devoted partner so convincingly that Elena almost believed it herself. Almost. You need to eat more, he murmured, leaning close. To observers it looked tender, concerned. But Elena heard the command underneath. You're embarrassing me with this frail act. I'm not acting. His fingers tightened on her hand. Not enough to hurt. Just enough to remind her who held the power now. Then try harder. She forced down a bite of toast, her stomach churning in protest. Everything tasted like ash lately. Like her body was rejecting sustenance the same way it was rejecting the life she'd chosen. The council meeting today is important, Damon continued, his voice pitched for her ears alone. The 7 territories are sending representatives. I'll be formally announcing our engagement. The toast lodged in her throat. Our what? Engagement, darling. His smile was sharp enough to draw blood. You didn't think I went through all this trouble just to have you as a girlfriend, did you? The Luna ceremony will take place at the next full moon. Once I mark you officially, the power transfer will be complete. No. The word screamed through Elena's mind, but it died before it reached her lips. What could she say? What could she do? Damon had taken everything, her mate, her wolf, her freedom. She was a prisoner in her own skin, withering away while he fed on the darkness she'd unwittingly given him. I need some air. She pushed back from the table, ignoring the way Damon's eyes hardened. Just for a moment. Please. The please cost her. She could see how much he liked hearing it, the submission, the deference. His smile softened into something almost gentle. 5 minutes. Then back inside. She nodded, swallowing the bile in her throat, and escaped through the side door into the garden. The morning air hit her face like a blessing. Cold, clean, free from Damon's suffocating presence. Elena walked until she reached the edge of the property, until the trees blocked the view of the house, until she could finally breathe. And then she bent over and vomited into the bushes. It wasn't the first time. She'd been sick every morning for the past week, her body rebelling against everything she tried to eat. At first, she'd blamed the withering, the rejection sickness that was slowly killing her. But as she straightened, wiping her mouth with a trembling hand, a different possibility crashed through her mind. No, please no. She pressed her palm flat against her stomach, searching for something she couldn't name. Presence. A spark. A tiny life that might be growing inside her. It's not possible, she told herself. We were careful. Damon always, but Damon was a manipulator, a strategist. A man who had spent 3 years positioning her like a chess piece, moving her toward a checkmate she'd never seen coming. What if this was part of his plan too? The thought sent her to her knees, dry heaves racking her body as the implications crashed over her. A child. She might be carrying a child. And if that child was Damon's, but what if it isn't? The question sliced through her panic like a blade. She and Marcus had never touched, never been intimate. But the fated bond created connections that defied physical logic. Ancient texts spoke of soul bonds so deep that conception could occur through spiritual union alone. 3 months ago, when the dual bond had first snapped into place, Elena had felt something shift inside her. Something profound and cosmic, as if the universe itself was rearranging to make room for a love she'd been too blind to recognize. What if that shift had created more than just a bond? What if it had created a life? She needed to know. She needed to be sure. But more than anything, she needed to get away from Damon before he discovered the truth. The pack healer lived on the eastern edge of the territory, in a small cottage covered in climbing roses. Elena had always liked Margaret, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes and steady hands who had treated every scrape and illness Elena had suffered since childhood. She prayed that loyalty would hold now. I need you to confirm something, Elena said, the moment Margaret closed the door behind them. And I need you to swear you won't tell anyone. Margaret's weathered face creased with concern. Child, you look terrible. Sit down before you fall down. Please. The word cracked in Elena's throat. Margaret, please. I think I might be. She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't make it real by speaking it aloud. Understanding dawned in the healer's eyes. Gently, she guided Elena to a worn armchair and pressed a warm cup of tea into her shaking hands. How far along do you think you are? I don't know. Maybe 3 months. Margaret's eyebrows rose, but she didn't comment. She simply pressed her palm to Elena's stomach and closed her eyes, her magic reaching inward to seek what Elena couldn't sense on her own. The silence stretched for an eternity. Finally, Margaret opened her eyes, and the expression on her face made Elena's heart stop. You're pregnant. The healer's voice was barely above a whisper. About 12 weeks by my reckoning. But Elena, she hesitated, something complicated moving behind her eyes. This child carries royal blood. Powerful royal blood. I can feel it humming under my palm like a heartbeat. The world tilted. Royal blood. Not Damon's. Damon came from a beta line, powerful but not royal. The only royal bloodline in the 7 territories belonged to Marcus. A sob ripped from Elena's throat. She pressed her hands over her mouth, trying to contain the sound, but it was too late. The tears came in a flood, carrying 3 weeks of grief and fear and hopeless longing. She was carrying Marcus's child, a baby conceived through the soul bond, through the cosmic connection she'd severed without understanding what she was throwing away. And Damon could never know. The werewolf law, Elena choked out. The claiming ceremony. Margaret's face went pale. A rejected mate's child belongs to whoever completes the claiming ceremony first. If Damon marks you before the next full moon, the baby will be bound to him. Elena finished. Magically, permanently, regardless of true paternity. The claiming ceremony did more than create a mate bond. It established magical lineage, tying any unborn children to the marking alpha through ancient, unbreakable magic. A law created centuries ago to prevent disputes over inheritance, never intended for situations like this. Damon would have total claim over Marcus's child. He could raise it, shape it, use it as a weapon against the very father it would never know. Elena would rather die than let that happen. I have to run. She surged to her feet, teacup crashing to the floor. I have to get out before. Elena. Margaret caught her arm, grip surprisingly strong. Listen to me. Running won't work. Damon has been bragging to the other pack leaders about a new tracking spell he acquired. Dark magic. Purchased from the shadow dealers in the Northern Territory. Her voice dropped. He can find you anywhere. The spell is tied to your rejection, to the power he siphoned from the broken bond. As long as that power lives in him, you can't escape. The walls closed in. A prisoner. She was a prisoner in plain sight, trapped by the very magic she'd stupidly handed over. Damon had thought of everything, planned for everything, positioned her so perfectly that she couldn't even run. What do I do? The question came out broken, barely human. Margaret, what the hell do I do? The healer was silent for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Then she reached into her pocket and pressed a folded piece of paper into Elena's palm. This was left on my doorstep this morning, she said quietly. I don't know who sent it. I don't know what it means. But it was addressed to you, Elena, and something tells me you need to see it. With trembling fingers, Elena unfolded the note. A single sentence, written in elegant script she didn't recognize. The library. Midnight. Tell no one. The hours crawled by like centuries. Elena sat through the territorial council meeting, smiled through the engagement announcement, accepted congratulations from pack leaders who had no idea they were celebrating her imprisonment. Damon's hand never left the small of her back, a constant reminder of his ownership. But something had shifted inside her. The note burned in her pocket like a coal, offering the first flicker of hope she'd felt in 3 weeks. Someone knew. Someone wanted to help. Someone had risked discovery to reach her. The library. Midnight. Tell no one. She didn't know who. She didn't know why. She didn't even know if it was a trap. Another manipulation in an endless game she hadn't known she was playing. But she did know one thing with absolute certainty. She would be there, because somewhere beneath her heart, a tiny life was growing. A miracle born from a bond she'd destroyed, carrying the blood of a king she'd rejected. Marcus's child. Her child. And she would burn down the entire world before she let Damon touch it. Midnight came slowly, and Elena slipped from the bedroom she now shared with Damon with practiced silence. He was a heavy sleeper, one of the few mercies she'd been granted. The dark power he channeled exhausted him, sent him into deep slumber by 10 o'clock each night. She'd used those hours to pace, to grieve, to plot escapes that could never work. Tonight, she used them to walk. The Packhouse Library was on the 3rd floor, a vast room filled with ancient texts and dusty volumes that no one had opened in decades. Elena had loved it as a child, had spent hours curled in the window seats, devouring stories of fated mates and epic romances. How naive I was, she thought, pushing open the heavy oak door. How stupidly, blindly naive. The library was dark, moonlight streaming through tall windows to paint silver stripes across the floor. Elena stepped inside, letting the door click shut behind her, and waited. For a long moment, nothing. Then a shadow moved in the corner, separating from the darkness like it had been born from it. Elena's heart stopped, because she knew that silhouette. Knew the broad shoulders and tall frame and the way he held himself like the weight of 7 territories rested on his back. Marcus. He stepped into a pool of moonlight, and she saw his face for the first time since that night on the cliff. The mask was gone. In its place was something raw and desperate, something that made her breath catch and her dying wolf stir weakly in her chest. "You came," he said, and his voice, God. His voice was rough with something that sounded terrifyingly like hope. Elena opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, the library door crashed open behind her, and Damon's furious voice shattered the silence. "I knew it. I knew you'd try to crawl back to him." Chapter 3. Elena's blood turned to ice. Damon stood in the library doorway, his handsome face twisted with rage she'd never seen before. The dark power he'd stolen pulsed visibly beneath his skin, black veins crawling up his neck like living shadows. "Did you really think I wouldn't know?" He stalked toward her, and Elena stumbled backward, her weakened body screaming in protest. "The tracking spell tells me everything, Elena. Every step you take, every breath you draw, every pathetic attempt to escape what you chose." Marcus moved. One moment he was standing in the moonlight. The next he was between Elena and Damon, a wall of muscle and barely contained fury. No words, no threats, just the silent promise of violence radiating from every line of his body. Damon stopped short, something flickering in his eyes. Fear, Elena realized. Beneath all that stolen power, Damon was afraid of his brother. "You don't want to do this," Damon said, and his voice had lost its sharp edge. "The council knows I'm here. If anything happens to me, leave." A single word. Quiet. Absolute. Carrying the weight of 7 territories and 400 years of royal bloodline. Damon's jaw clenched. The dark veins pulsed brighter, and for a terrifying moment, Elena thought he might attack. But then his gaze slid past Marcus to land on her, and something cold and calculating replaced the rage. "This isn't over." He stepped back toward the door, adjusting his collar with deliberate casualness. "You're still mine, Elena. The claiming ceremony happens at the full moon, and there's nothing either of you can do to stop it." He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the corridor until silence swallowed them whole. Elena's legs gave out. She would have hit the floor if Marcus hadn't caught her, his arms wrapping around her with a gentleness that cracked something open in her chest. For one perfect moment, she let herself lean into him, breathing in the scent of pine and wood smoke that had haunted her dreams for 3 weeks. Then reality crashed back, and she pulled away. "You shouldn't have come." Her voice was barely a whisper. "He'll use this against you, against us." Marcus's expression was unreadable in the moonlight, but his hands lingered on her arms like he couldn't bear to let go. "I didn't send that note." "What?" "I didn't send it." His dark eyes searched her face, cataloging every shadow, every sign of the withering that was slowly killing her. "Someone else wanted us both here tonight." Before Elena could process what that meant, a new voice drifted from the shadows at the back of the library. "That would be me." An elderly woman emerged from between the towering bookshelves, her silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. She walked with a cane but carried herself like a queen, her spine straight despite the weight of her years. Elena's breath caught. She knew that face. Everyone in the 7 territories knew that face. Iris Ashford, the former Luna Queen, Marcus's grandmother and the keeper of ancient wolf law. The woman who hadn't been seen in public for nearly a decade. "Grandmother." Marcus's voice held a note of surprise and warning. "You shouldn't be here." "If Damon..." That boy doesn't scare me. Iris waved a dismissive hand and settled into one of the library's worn armchairs like she owned it, which Elena supposed she technically did. I've been watching his schemes unfold for 3 years, waiting for the right moment to intervene. Unfortunately, my timing was... Her gaze moved to Elena, filled with something that looked painfully like pity. Less than ideal. You know. Elena's voice cracked. You know what he did. What he's doing. I know everything, child. Iris gestured to the chair across from her. Sit. You look like you're about to collapse, and we have much to discuss. Elena glanced at Marcus, but his attention was fixed on his grandmother with an intensity that suggested he knew as little about this meeting as she did. Slowly, carefully, she lowered herself into the offered chair. Her body screamed with exhaustion. Even that small movement had drained what little energy she had left. The withering is accelerating, Iris observed, her sharp eyes missing nothing. You have perhaps 2 weeks before your wolf dies completely. After that, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Why am I here? Elena asked. What do you want from me? I want to give you the truth. Iris leaned forward, her weathered hands folded over the head of her cane. The truth that Marcus has been forbidden to speak. The truth that could have prevented all of this. If only I hadn't been so focused on keeping you both safe. Silence stretched through the library, heavy with the weight of secrets about to be revealed. My grandson has loved you since the moment he first caught your scent, Iris said quietly. 3 years ago at the winter solstice celebration. You walked past him wearing a blue dress, and I watched his entire world reshape itself around you. Elena's heart clenched. She remembered that night. She'd been 19, nervous about attending her first formal pack function. A stranger had brushed past her in the crowd, and something electric had sparked through her veins. She'd turned to look, but he was already gone. That was... Her voice failed. She tried again. That was when the bond first stirred. The bond knew from the first moment. As did Marcus. Iris's gaze moved to her grandson, who stood rigid in the shadows, his face carved from stone. But Marcus also knew what claiming you would mean, what danger it would put you in. The Alpha King's enemies, Elena breathed, pieces clicking into place. He told me once, or someone told me, that the king had to hide his identity to protect those he loved. The 7 territories have been at peace for a century, but that peace is fragile. Iris's voice darkened. There are those who would tear it apart in a heartbeat if they knew where to strike. The vampire covens to the east. The witch conclave in the mountains. The rogue packs that lurk in the shadows, waiting for any sign of weakness. She paused. And those within our own territories who believe they deserve the crown more than the true bloodline. Elena's stomach dropped. You're talking about Damon. I'm talking about the forces that placed Damon in our midst. Iris's expression hardened. That boy is not an Ashford by blood. He never was. The revelation hit Elena like a physical blow. She stared at Iris, unable to process what she was hearing. What do you mean? He's Marcus's brother. Everyone knows. Everyone knows what we told them. Iris cut her off. 30 years ago, a woman appeared at the pack border with an infant in her arms. She claimed the child was the result of an affair with my son, Marcus's father. She died before she could answer any questions, and the child was left in our care. My father accepted him. Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice rough with old pain. Gave him our name. Raised him as his own. Because your father was a good man. Iris's voice softened. Perhaps too good. He never questioned the convenience of it all. The mysterious woman, the perfectly timed appearance, the child who looked just enough like an Ashford to pass. She shook her head. I questioned. But by the time I found proof of my suspicions, Damon had already begun his campaign for Elena. Elena's mind raced, connecting dots she'd been too blind to see. He wasn't just after power. He was placed here, positioned. Like a weapon, Iris confirmed. A weapon aimed directly at the heart of the royal bloodline. Whether he knows the truth of his origins, I cannot say. But his obsession with gaining power through you, through breaking the mate bond and siphoning its darkness, that is not random chance. That is design. Whose design? Iris was silent for a long moment. That is what we must discover. But first, we must deal with the more immediate problem. Her gaze locked onto Elena with uncomfortable intensity. You are dying. Your wolf is dying. And in 2 weeks, Damon will claim you in a ceremony that will bind you to him forever. There has to be a way to stop it. Elena heard the desperation in her own voice and didn't care. A way to break free. A way to... There is one way. The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. Elena leaned forward, her heart pounding. Tell me. Iris exchanged a look with Marcus, a silent communication that spoke of arguments already had and lost. Then she turned back to Elena. In the ancient texts, there exists a ritual called the Trials of Atonement. 3 impossible tasks designed to test a wolf's worthiness to reclaim what they have forsaken. Iris's voice dropped. If you complete all 3 trials, the rejection is reversed. The bond reforms. The withering heals. Hope sparked in Elena's chest. Wild, desperate hope that made her feel more alive than she had in weeks. Then I'll do it. Whatever it takes, I'll... No wolf has survived the trials in 400 years. The words hit her like a splash of ice water. The first trial requires strength you don't possess, Iris continued relentlessly. The second requires a connection to your wolf that has been severed. The third, she shook her head. The third requires sacrificing something precious. Something you may not be willing to give. I don't care. Elena pushed to her feet, swaying dangerously. I'll find a way. I'll get stronger. You'll die. Marcus's voice cut through her determination like a blade. He moved out of the shadows, his face a mask of anguish he was barely containing. You'll walk into those trials half dead and half willing, and you'll die before you complete the first task. And I will not. His voice cracked. He looked away, jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscles jump. I cannot bury you, Elena. I cannot stand over your grave knowing I could have stopped you. You don't get to make that choice for me. Someone has to, since you seem determined to throw your life away. They stared at each other across the moonlit library, and Elena realized she was seeing Marcus clearly for the first time. Not the cold, distant stranger she'd believed him to be. Not the untouchable alpha king hiding behind a mask of indifference. Just a man in love. A man who had watched the woman he cherished choose someone else, had watched her sign away their bond, had walked away that night because staying would have destroyed what little remained of him. And now he was watching her die, inch by inch, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. You loved me. The words fell from her lips before she could stop them. This whole time, 3 years of silence, of distance, of pretending I didn't exist. You loved me. Something shattered in Marcus's expression. The mask crumbled, and what lay beneath stole Elena's breath. From the first moment, he said hoarsely, from the first breath I took after catching your scent. You were everything, Elena. You are everything. And I thought. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture so human and vulnerable it made her ache. I thought I was protecting you, keeping my distance, hiding what I felt, waiting until I could neutralize the threats and claim you properly. But Damon knew. Bitterness twisted Marcus's voice. He watched me watch you. He saw what I was doing and understood exactly how to use it against me. While I was planning courtship rituals and selecting claiming gifts, he was positioning himself as your lover. Your choice. His laugh was hollow. I was days away from revealing everything. Days away from telling you the truth. From asking you to be mine. And then he announced that you'd been together for 3 years. And I knew. He broke off, turning away. You knew he'd won, Elena finished softly. I knew he'd stolen something that could never be recovered. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. I knew that even if I told you the truth, you would hate me for keeping it from you. for making you doubt your own choices, for not fighting for you the way he did. So you let me go. I let you choose." He turned back, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Even knowing what Damon was, what he was planning, I let you choose, because that's what love is. Trusting someone to make their own decisions, even when those decisions destroy you." Elena crossed the space between them without conscious thought. Her hand found his chest, pressing flat against the place where his heart beat strong and steady beneath her palm. The absence of the bond howled between them, a void that should have been filled with warmth and connection and home. "I was wrong," she said, and the admission cost her everything. "I was stupid and blind and wrong, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends. But I need you to understand something, Marcus." She lifted her chin, meeting his dark eyes with every ounce of determination she had left. "That choice I made? It wasn't about you. It was never about you. Damon spent 3 years weaving a web of lies so perfect I couldn't see the truth even when it was standing right in front of me." Her voice hardened. "But I see it now. I see you now. And I am not going to let him win. Elena, the trials of atonement. That's my choice. My decision." She cut him off before he could argue. "I know I'm not strong enough now. I know I need time to heal, to reconnect with my wolf, to prepare. But I am going to complete those trials, Marcus. I am going to reclaim what I threw away. And then I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt how much I love you." The word hung between them. Love. She'd never said it to Damon. Not once in 3 years. She'd thought she loved him, had convinced herself that what they shared was enough. But the word had never crossed her lips. Now it fell from her as naturally as breathing. Because it was true. It had always been true. From that first electric spark at the winter solstice. From the moment their souls recognized each other across a crowded room. She had loved Marcus Ashford. She'd just been too foolish to know it. "You're pregnant." The words came from Iris, shattering the moment with surgical precision. Elena whirled, her heart stopping. "How did you?" "I've been a healer for 70 years, child. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Iris rose from her chair, her expression grave. "The royal bloodline announcing itself in your womb. The child you carry, it's Marcus's, isn't it?" Silence. Elena couldn't bring herself to look at Marcus. Couldn't bear to see whatever emotion was written on his face. "Yes," she whispered. "The soul bond. Before I broke it. Before I—" Her voice cracked. "We never touched. But the bond created a connection deep enough to." Strong arms wrapped around her from behind. Marcus pulled her against his chest, his face buried in her hair, his whole body shaking with emotion she could feel even without their bond. "A child," he breathed. "Our child. Damon doesn't know." Elena's words tumbled out in a rush. "He can't know. If he marks me before the full moon, the claiming ceremony will bind the baby to him. The magic doesn't care about true paternity. It only cares about the mark." Marcus went rigid against her. "He will never touch you." The words came out as a growl, more wolf than man. "I will tear out his throat before I let him. If you kill him, the darkness he's stolen will destroy the 7 territories." Iris's voice cut through his rage. "The power he siphoned from the broken bond has to be released properly, or it will corrupt everything it touches. There's no simple solution here, Marcus. There never was." Elena felt Marcus's arms tighten around her, his desperation a tangible thing. "Then what do we do?" It was Iris who answered, her ancient eyes filled with a sorrow that spoke of centuries of loss. "We get Elena somewhere safe, somewhere Damon's tracking spell cannot reach. We help her heal, reconnect with her wolf, prepare for the trials." She paused. "And we pray that she's stronger than every wolf who has attempted them before." "No." Marcus released Elena and stepped around her, facing his grandmother with an expression of absolute refusal. "You're not attempting the trials," he said flatly. His gaze moved to Elena, and something in his face crumbled. When he spoke again, his voice was soft, broken. "I won't watch you die twice." The words hung in the moonlit library, carrying the weight of everything he'd already lost, and everything he stood to lose again. And Elena realized, with a certainty that settled into her bones like stone, that convincing him was going to be the hardest battle she'd ever fought. Chapter 4. The safe house was a cabin tucked into the mountains at the northern border, so remote that even the pack's most experienced trackers would struggle to find it. Marcus had built it himself years ago, as a refuge for the Alpha King's most vulnerable secrets. Now it sheltered the woman who had shattered his heart, and the child growing inside her. Elena stood at the window watching snow fall through the pine trees. 3 days since they'd fled the pack house. 3 days since Marcus had carried her through the forest, her body too weak to run, her wolf too silent to shift. 3 days of healing, of rest, of trying not to think about what was happening back home. 3 days of torture, because Marcus was everywhere. He slept on the floor outside her bedroom door, unable to rest unless he knew she was safe. He cooked every meal with careful attention to what would nourish her, what would strengthen the baby, what would coax her dying wolf back to life. He chopped wood and built fires and stood guard through the long nights, never complaining, never asking for anything in return. And he never touched her. Not once. Not even the brush of fingers when passing a cup of tea. He maintained a careful distance at all times, as if coming too close might break whatever fragile restraint was keeping him together. Elena understood why. The rejection had severed their bond, but something lingered in its absence. Ghost signals, echoes of what they'd lost. When Marcus was near, she could feel flickers of his emotions bleeding through the void. His grief, vast and oceanic, threatening to pull her under. His longing, sharp enough to cut glass. The iron control he wielded every moment of every day, fighting against instincts that screamed at him to claim what was his. She felt it all, and she knew he felt her too. "You should eat something." His voice came from behind her, rough with exhaustion. Elena turned to find him standing in the doorway, holding a bowl of soup that smelled of herbs and warmth. "I'm not hungry." "You haven't been hungry for 3 days. Eat anyway." It wasn't a request. But the command was softened by the worry in his dark eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way his gaze dropped to her stomach for just a moment before he caught himself. Elena took the bowl. Their fingers didn't touch. Marcus made sure of it. But the heat of the ceramic seeped into her palms like a promise. "Any word from Iris?" "Not yet." He moved to the fireplace, adding another log to the flames. "The investigation takes time. Damon's origins are buried deep. We don't have time." "I know." The words hung between them, heavy with everything they weren't saying. The full moon was 12 days away. The claiming ceremony that would bind Elena to Damon forever, that would strip her child of its true father, that would complete whatever dark plan had been set in motion decades ago. 12 days to find a solution, to find a way out, to save everything. It wasn't enough. They both knew it wasn't enough. "Eat," Marcus said again, softer this time. "Please." Elena sank into the chair by the fire and forced herself to swallow spoonful after spoonful of soup. It tasted like nothing, her body still rejecting sustenance, her wolf still silent and unreachable. But she ate because he asked her to, because the worry in his eyes was too much to bear. "Tell me about the trials." Marcus's jaw tightened. "No, Marcus." "I said no." He turned from the fire, and the anguish in his expression stole her breath. "I will not help you walk into a death trap. I will not hand you the tools to destroy yourself. Find another topic of conversation, Elena, because this one is finished." "So I'm supposed to just sit here and wait?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "Wait for Damon to find us? Wait for the full moon? Wait for everything we love to be destroyed because you're too afraid to let me fight?" "I am not afraid." "Then what are you?" He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just short of her chair. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Close enough that the ghost bond flickered to life, flooding her with echoes of his emotion. Pain. So much pain. "I am terrified," he said, his voice cracking. "I am terrified of losing you." I am terrified of watching you die. I am terrified of standing over your grave knowing I could have prevented it. Knowing I should have prevented it. Knowing that the last memory I have of you will be your body broken by trials no wolf has survived in 400 years. His hands were shaking. Elena realized with a start that he was crying, silent tears cutting tracks down his face, breaking through the iron control he'd maintained for so long. You are the only thing I have ever wanted, he whispered. The only thing I have ever loved. And you are asking me to help you die. Elena set aside the soup bowl and rose to her feet. They were inches apart now. So close she could count his eyelashes, could see the gold flecks hidden in his dark irises. So close that reaching for him would be the easiest thing in the world. But she didn't reach, couldn't reach, because the bond was gone, and touching him without it felt like trespassing on sacred ground. I'm asking you to help me live, she said softly. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. Then stand somewhere else. A ghost of a smile flickered across his face. Gone before it could fully form, but there. Evidence that the man she loved was still inside the anguished king. You're impossible, he murmured. I learned from the best. They stood there in the firelight, breathing the same air, feeling echoes of each other's hearts. And Elena made herself a promise. She would find a way to make him understand, to help him see that the trials weren't a death sentence. They were a chance to reclaim what they'd lost, to protect their child, to build the future that Damon's schemes had stolen from them. But first she needed to get stronger, needed to reconnect with her wolf, needed to become someone capable of surviving what was coming. And that started with rest. I'm going to bed, she said, stepping back from the magnetic pull of his presence. Thank you for the soup, Marcus nodded, his expression shuddering back into the careful mask he wore like armor. I'll be outside if you need anything. She wanted to tell him he didn't need to sleep on the floor, that the bed was big enough for two, that she would give anything to fall asleep in his arms, surrounded by his warmth, protected by his strength. But she said none of those things, because wanting something didn't make it right, and they were both too broken to pretend otherwise. Elena woke to shouting. She was on her feet before she was fully conscious, her weakened body protesting as she stumbled toward the cabin door. Marcus was outside, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp with fury. When? How many territories? A pause. Then, that's impossible. The tracking spell, we neutralized it. He shouldn't be able to. Another pause, longer this time. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had gone cold, dead. The voice of the Alpha King preparing for war. Pull everyone back. No one engages. And get Iris on a secure line. I need to know what we're dealing with. He ended the call and stood motionless in the snow, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Elena pushed open the cabin door, ignoring the blast of cold that cut through her thin clothes. What happened? Marcus turned. In the gray morning light, his face looked carved from granite. Damon has made his move. They gathered around the cabin's small radio, listening to the broadcast loop on repeat. Damon's voice filled the space, smooth, charming, devastated. The perfect performance of a heartbroken alpha whose mate had been stolen by rogues. Disappeared 3 days ago. Evidence suggests she was taken against her will by enemies of the pack. I am offering a substantial bounty for any information leading to her safe return. Elena's stomach churned. He was good. So impossibly good at weaving lies that sounded like truth. In light of this crisis, and with the blessing of the 7 territorial councils, I am moving forward with our mating ceremony. The ritual will take place on the blood moon, 3 days from now, as a beacon to guide Elena home. The ancient magic of the claiming ceremony will restore her to health and break whatever dark spell has been used to confuse her. 3 days. 3 days. Elena gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. He can't do this. The territorial councils wouldn't agree to. He's not asking permission. Marcus's voice was flat. He's using blood magic, broadcasting to all 7 territories simultaneously, That's not normal pack communication. He's reaching directly into people's minds, planting suggestions, making them believe what he wants them to believe. Blood magic is forbidden. Damon doesn't care about forbidden. Marcus killed the radio, the sudden silence deafening. He's been practicing for years, probably decades, building his power, waiting for the right moment. Elena sank into a chair, her legs unable to support her weight. 3 days. She had 3 days to escape a trap that was closing from every direction. 3 days to save her child, to save Marcus, to save herself. It wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. A knock at the cabin door made them both freeze. Marcus was across the room in an instant, positioning himself between Elena and the entrance. His body had gone rigid, every muscle coiled for violence. Who's there? Someone who shouldn't be, which means you should open this door before I freeze to death, grandson. Marcus's shoulders sagged with relief. He pulled open the door to reveal Iris Ashford, wrapped in a traveling cloak, snow dusting her silver hair. Behind her, the forest was empty. No guards, no escort, no protection. How did you get here alone? Marcus demanded, ushering her inside. It's a 2-day journey through hostile territory. I have my ways. Iris cut him off with a wave of her cane. There are advantages to being a 1,000-year-old woman that nobody takes seriously. She moved past him to the fire, holding her weathered hands toward the flames. We have a problem. We heard the broadcast. You heard the public version. The reality is worse. Iris turned to face them, and Elena saw something in her expression she'd never expected to see. Fear. I found Damon's true parentage, Iris said. I wish to all the gods I hadn't. Marcus pulled a chair forward for his grandmother, but she shook her head, preferring to stand. There are legends, she began, that most wolves consider myth, stories passed down from a time before recorded history, before the 7 territories existed, before the werewolf kingdoms were formed. Her voice dropped. Stories about the shadow wolf. Elena frowned. I've never heard of. You wouldn't have. The elders made sure those stories were forgotten. Burned the texts. Silenced the historians. Erased every trace of the creature who nearly destroyed our entire species. Iris's eyes were distant, seeing something 1,000 years gone. The shadow wolf was the firstborn of our kind, and the most powerful. He could walk between worlds, command darkness itself, feed on the life force of other wolves to make himself immortal. What happened to him? The alpha king of that era, your ancestor Marcus, sacrificed himself to trap the shadow wolf in a prison between dimensions. A cage made of pure light, sealed by the royal bloodline's power. Iris paused. That cage has held for 1,000 years. But it was never meant to be permanent. The fire crackled in the silence. Outside, wind howled through the pine trees. Damon is his son, Elena whispered, the pieces clicking into place. That's what you're saying. Damon is the shadow wolf's child. Not his child. His vessel. Iris's voice hardened. Damon was created grown, engineered, whatever dark term you prefer, as a container for the shadow wolf's consciousness. A body that could exist in our world while maintaining a connection to his father's prison. The power he's siphoning from my broken bond, Elena breathed. The claiming ceremony will give him access to the royal bloodline's magic. Through you, through the mate bond you share with Marcus, Damon will be able to reach the cage itself. Iris's face was grim. The blood moon amplifies dark magic 100-fold. If Damon completes the ceremony on that night, he won't just claim you as his Luna. He'll drain Marcus's power through the echoes of your broken bond and use it to shatter the cage. Resurrecting his father, Marcus finished hollowly. Releasing him, the shadow wolf will pour himself into Damon's body, and everything our ancestors sacrificed will be undone. The 7 territories will fall. The werewolf kingdoms will crumble, and darkness will rule for eternity. Silence crashed over them like a wave. Elena stood frozen, her mind racing through implications too terrible to fully grasp. Everything, the manipulation, the 3-year courtship, the rejection she'd been maneuvered into making. It was all part of this. A 1,000-year plan to destroy everything she loved. And she'd walked right into it. There has to be a way to stop him, she said. Kill him before the ceremony. The darkness he carries would seek a new host, Iris interrupted. Possibly Marcus, given the bond fragments connecting you. Possibly you. Possibly the child you carry. Death is not a solution. Then what is? Iris turned to look at Elena with an expression of terrible pity. The only thing powerful enough to cleanse darkness is light. And the only source of light pure enough to counter the Shadow Wolf's power is the trials of atonement. Complete the trials. Restore your bond with Marcus. And the light of a true mating will burn away everything Damon has become. Elena's breath caught. But she'll die, Marcus said, his voice raw. You said yourself. No wolf has survived in 400 years. No wolf has attempted them with royal blood growing in her womb. Iris's gaze moved to Elena's stomach. That child is Marcus's heir. It carries the power of the Alpha King's bloodline. It might be enough to. Might, Marcus snarled. You're asking me to risk Elena's life, and my child's life on might? I'm asking you to face reality. Iris's voice was steel. In 3 days, Damon will complete a ceremony that ends our world. Elena is dying anyway. The withering will claim her within weeks. And the child she carries will either be bound to a monster or lost entirely. She turned back to the fire, her shoulders bowed with the weight of centuries. There are no good choices here, Marcus. There are only terrible ones. And we have 3 days to make them. The hours blurred together after that. Marcus retreated to a corner of the cabin, silent and unreachable. Iris documented everything she knew about the trials, scratching notes onto parchment with a shaking hand. And Elena sat by the window, watching snow fall, feeling the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on her chest. 3 days. 3 days to survive trials that had killed everyone who attempted them. 3 days to restore a bond she'd destroyed. 3 days to save the world from a darkness that had been scheming for a millennium. It was impossible. Absolutely, categorically impossible. But when she closed her eyes, she felt a flutter in her belly. The first stirring of the life growing inside her. Marcus's child, reaching out, making itself known. I'm here, that flutter seemed to say. I'm fighting. Are you? Elena opened her eyes. She found Marcus standing at the window, staring out at the endless white of the mountains. His reflection in the glass showed a man on the edge of shattering. I'm doing the trials. He didn't move, didn't respond. But she saw his jaw tighten, saw his hands curl into fists at his sides. Marcus, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But I'm not going to sit here and watch everything burn because I was too afraid to fight. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his back. This is my choice, my decision. And I need you to. He spun around so fast she stumbled backward. His hand closed around her wrist. The first time he'd touched her since carrying her to safety 3 days ago. The ghost bond exploded to life at the contact, flooding her with his emotions. Terror, fury, desperation, and beneath it all, love so vast it stole her breath. Then I'm doing them with you. The words came out rough, torn from somewhere deep inside him. Elena stared. What? The trials. His grip on her wrist didn't loosen. If you're determined to walk into death, then I'm walking beside you. Every step, every challenge, every moment. His dark eyes blazed with something fierce and unbreakable. You are not facing this alone, Elena. Not now. Not ever again. The trials are for the one who rejected. I don't care what they're for. I don't care what the ancient texts say. I don't care about tradition or precedent or 400 years of failure. He pulled her closer, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. You are my mate, my heart, the mother of my child. And I will tear apart reality itself before I let you die alone. Elena's vision blurred with tears. For 3 years, she'd thought he didn't want her, didn't see her, didn't care. Now, with his breath warm on her face and his emotions flooding through the ghost of their bond, she finally understood the truth. Marcus Ashford had loved her enough to let her go, and he loved her enough to follow her into hell. Together, then, she whispered. His hand released her wrist only to cup her face, his thumb brushing away the tears that spilled down her cheeks. Together. Chapter 5. The entrance to the mirror caverns looked like a wound torn in the mountainside. Elena stood before it, shivering despite the thick cloak Marcus had wrapped around her shoulders. The opening was tall and narrow, jagged edges of obsidian framing an absolute darkness that seemed to breathe. Cold air poured from inside, carrying whispers she couldn't quite understand. "You can still change your mind." Marcus's voice came from behind her, rough with barely contained fear. He'd said it a dozen times since they'd left the cabin at dawn, following Iris's ancient map to this forgotten place. Each time Elena had shaken her head. Each time he'd fallen silent. But he hadn't tried to stop her. Not once. "I'm not changing my mind." She turned to face him, drinking in the sight of him against the gray mountain sky. His dark hair was windswept, his jaw shadowed with stubble, his eyes blazing with that fierce, consuming love she'd been too blind to recognize for 3 years. "Are you? I told you. Where you go, I go." The texts say the trials are meant for the one who rejected. The texts can burn. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body through the freezing air. "I watched you walk away from me once. I stood there and let it happen because I thought I was doing the right thing." His voice cracked. "I am never making that mistake again." Elena reached for his hand. The ghost bond flared at the contact, sending ripples of his emotion through her. Terror, determination, love so vast it stole her breath. She squeezed his fingers, drawing strength from his presence, from the simple fact of him beside her. "Together," she said. "Together," he echoed. They walked into the darkness. The cavern swallowed them whole. For the first few steps, Elena could see nothing. The darkness was absolute, pressing against her skin like something alive. She kept her grip on Marcus's hand, focusing on the warmth of his palm, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Then the mirrors appeared. They rose from the cavern floor like trees in a forest, tall, narrow sheets of glass that reflected nothing. Their surfaces were black as the void between stars, absorbing what little light existed, waiting. "The trial of truth," Marcus murmured. "These mirrors will show you every lie you've ever told yourself. Every moment of willful blindness that led to the rejection. Will they show you too?" His jaw tightened. "I'm standing beside you. I imagine they'll show whatever serves their purpose." Elena took a breath, then another. The baby fluttered in her belly, that tiny presence making itself known, reminding her what she was fighting for. "For you," she thought. "For your father. For the future we should have had." She stepped forward. The first mirror blazed to life. The winter solstice 3 years ago. Elena, 19 years old, standing in a crowded ballroom in a blue dress that made her feel like a princess. The packed celebration swirled around her. Dancing couples, glittering lights, the hum of 100 conversations. Presence behind her, the brush of a shoulder against hers. Heat flooding through her veins like wildfire. She turned, but he was already gone. Just a glimpse, dark hair, broad shoulders, a face that seemed carved from shadows and secrets. Her wolf stirred for the first time, reached for him, called out, and Elena turned away, told herself it was nothing, just a stranger, just nerves, just the excitement of her first formal event. Told herself she didn't feel the thread of gold spinning between her soul and his. The mirror went dark. Elena stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Beside her, Marcus was rigid with tension. "I felt you," she whispered. "Even then I felt you. But I told myself. I know." His voice was rough. "I felt it too." They moved deeper into the cavern. The second mirror showed her the night she met Damon. A coffee shop near the pack house, 6 weeks after the solstice. Elena, sitting alone, trying to study for exams while her wolf paced restlessly inside her. The chair across from her scraped back. A handsome stranger sat down, all warm smiles and easy charm. "I'm Damon. I've seen you around, but we've never been properly introduced." Elena's wolf growled. Low warning, wrong, wrong, wrong. But Damon was attentive. Damon was interested. Damon made her feel seen in a way the cold, distant older brother never had. She ignored her wolf's warning. She smiled back. The memory shifted, showing interaction after interaction. Damon at her door with flowers. Damon walking her home after class. Damon holding her hand in public, claiming her in front of everyone while Marcus. The mirror flickered to Marcus, standing at the edge of every gathering, watching her with eyes that burned, leaving rooms when she entered, keeping his distance while his brother drew ever closer. Not indifference, Elena realized now. Not coldness. Protection. Sacrifice. A king hiding his heart to keep her safe from enemies who would tear apart anyone he loved. And she'd read every signal backwards. "I thought you didn't want me." The words tore from her throat. "Every time you walked away. Every time you refused to look at me. I thought you were rejecting me before I could reject you. I was protecting you." Marcus's voice shattered. "Or trying to. Every moment I spent near you was another moment my enemies could identify you as important to me. I thought distance would keep you safe until I could eliminate the threats. It just made me think I wasn't worth fighting for." The mirrors pulsed around them, hungry for more truth. The third mirror was the cruelest. Elena lying in bed beside Damon, 3 months before the rejection ceremony. Her wolf was silent, had been silent for weeks, refusing to acknowledge the man she'd chosen. But Elena ignored it, told herself wolves could be wrong, told herself love didn't have to feel like wildfire, told herself the comfortable warmth Damon offered was enough. And beneath all those lies, the truth she couldn't face. Marcus's intensity frightened her. The way he looked at her, like she was the center of the universe, like he would burn down the world for her, it was too much, too consuming, too vast. She wasn't that woman. She wasn't worthy of that kind of devotion. Damon was easier. Damon felt manageable. Damon didn't threaten to overwhelm everything she thought she knew about herself. So she chose the easy path, the comfortable path. The path that let her stay small and safe and protected from a love that demanded everything. Elena fell to her knees. The weight of it crushed her. 3 years of willful blindness, of ignoring every sign, of choosing comfort over truth. She'd rejected Marcus not because she didn't love him, but because she was terrified of how much she did. "I knew." The words scraped from somewhere deep inside her. "Part of me always knew something was wrong with Damon. My wolf tried to warn me. But I ignored her because..." Her voice broke. "Because Marcus made me feel things I wasn't ready to feel. Because loving him meant becoming someone braver than I thought I could be." Marcus knelt beside her, his hands hovering over her shoulders, desperate to touch but still afraid. "Elena, I rejected you because I was a coward." The truth rang through the cavern like a bell. For a moment nothing happened. The mirrors stood silent, their black surfaces reflecting nothing. Then the world came apart. The collapse started at the edges. Mirrors cracking, shattering, their fragments flying inward like a crystal hurricane. Elena screamed, throwing her arms over her head, expecting the shards to tear her apart. But Marcus was there. He wrapped himself around her, shielding her with his body, his arms a cage of muscle and bone protecting her from the storm. Glass shrieked past them, close enough to slice the air, but nothing touched her. Nothing penetrated the barrier of the man who loved her. Then, as quickly as it began, it stopped. Elena opened her eyes. The shattered mirrors hadn't fallen. They hung suspended in the air, millions of glittering fragments forming something new. Something impossible. A doorway. The shards had reformed into an arch of crystalline light, pulsing with energy that made Elena's soul ache. Through it, she could see another world. A frozen landscape under a sky of eternal darkness. A lake of perfect glass stretching to the horizon. The second trial. We passed. Her voice came out a whisper. We actually. The fever hit without warning. One moment she was kneeling on the cavern floor, heart pounding with triumph. The next, fire was racing through her veins, burning her from the inside out. She crumpled against Marcus, her vision swimming, her body convulsing with heat she couldn't control. Elena! Marcus caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her into his arms. His hand pressed against her forehead and immediately withdrew. She could feel how hot she was, burning like a furnace, her skin radiating heat that should have been impossible. The trial, she gasped. It took something. Stay with me. His voice was steel wrapped around desperation. Stay with me, Elena. We're not dying in this cavern after surviving those damned mirrors. He gathered her in his arms and rose, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing. Each step toward the crystalline doorway sent fresh waves of agony through her body, but she clung to consciousness with everything she had. The baby, she thought frantically. Is the baby? As if in answer, that tiny flutter came again. Weak, but present. Still fighting. I'm fighting too, she promised. We're going to make it. Marcus laid her on the frozen ground beyond the doorway, her head pillowed in his lap. The eternal eclipse cast everything in shades of blue and silver, the frozen lake stretching before them like a mirror of the heavens. Look at me. His voice cracked as his hands cupped her face. Elena, look at me. She forced her eyes to focus. Above her, Marcus's face was stripped of every mask he'd ever worn. The Alpha King was gone. The cold, distant protector was gone. All that remained was a man in love, terrified of losing everything. I should have fought for you. The words came out broken, raw, torn from somewhere deep inside him. 3 years, I watched Damon poison you against me, and I told myself I was doing the right thing. I should have made you see. I should have. You couldn't have known. Her voice was a thread of sound. He was careful. So careful. I should have tried harder. Should have found a way. Marcus. She lifted her hand. It took everything she had, and pressed her palm to his chest. Beneath her fingers, his heart was racing, pounding against his ribs like it might break free. Stop. Stop blaming yourself for someone else's cruelty. His hand covered hers, holding it against his heart. Tears fell from his eyes, landing on her cheeks, mingling with her own. I can't lose you, he whispered. Not when I just got you back. Not when. He broke off, unable to finish. Elena wanted to tell him she wasn't going anywhere, wanted to promise they'd make it through this together. But the fever was stealing her words, her thoughts, her grip on reality. All she could do was hold on to him, hold on to this moment, hold on to the love burning between them like a beacon in the dark. She wasn't sure how long she drifted. Time moved strangely in this place. The eternal eclipse neither rising nor setting, the frozen lake reflecting stars that didn't exist. Marcus never moved, never let go of her hand, never stopped murmuring words she couldn't quite understand. But eventually the fever began to break. Elena felt it like a wave receding, the fire pulling back from her veins, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Her wolf stirred for the first time in weeks, weak as a newborn pup but present. Alive. Fighting. We're still here, that presence seemed to say. We're still fighting. Elena's eyes fluttered open. The first thing she saw was Marcus's face, haggard with exhaustion, aged by fear, but blazing with relief as he watched her return to consciousness. Hey, she croaked. Hey yourself. His voice shook. You scared the hell out of me. Sorry. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, her body screaming in protest. How long? Hours. Maybe longer. He helped her ease upright, supporting her weight with careful hands. The fever finally broke about 20 minutes ago. I wasn't sure if... He stopped, swallowing hard. I wasn't sure. Elena leaned against him, drawing strength from his warmth. Her gaze moved to the crystalline doorway behind them, now dark and silent, the first trial complete, and then to the frozen lake ahead. The second trial waited somewhere on that ice. Somewhere in the darkness beneath the eternal eclipse. But as her eyes traced the horizon, she saw something else. Movement. In the distance, across the frozen expanse, dark shapes marching in formation. An army, covering the ice like a spreading stain. And at their head, visible even from here, a figure wreathed in shadows. A figure she would recognize anywhere. Damon. He found us, Elena breathed. Marcus's arms tightened around her. When she looked up, his eyes were blazing gold. His wolf rising to the surface, ready for war. Then we'll finish this together, he said. His voice a low growl that resonated in her bones. Or not at all. In the distance, the army continued its advance. Behind them, 2 more trials waited. Above them, the blood moon was rising somewhere beyond the eternal eclipse. And in Elena's belly, a tiny life fluttered. A promise of everything they were fighting for. She reached for Marcus's hand. Together, she whispered. He pulled her to her feet, and they turned to face the frozen lake. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like, and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily, and also to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.